Welcome to the International Institute for Facilitation's podcast, Spaghetti on the Wall. I'm Eileen Dowse, Chair Emeritus and Director of Certification for INIFAC. And today I'm joined by Dorothea Brennan, who is a certified master facilitator, a certified facilitated leader, a certified virtual facilitator. This woman's so certified. And she's also a board member on INIFAC and a great supporter of INIFAC. She is also a retired senior executive, and her company is Crownest Facilitation. And for the next few minutes, we're going to talk about facilitation processes. We're going to serve them up with a whole bunch of fun, side of humor, and heck, we might even get into a food fight. You just never know. So welcome, Dorothea.
Thank you, Eileen. It's a delight to be here. This is a lot of fun in terms of an approach.
Absolutely, and I love hanging out with you. So, hey, let's get this straight. You know I'm from Canada, you're from the States. So, let's get our pronunciation straight. Are we talking about a process or a process?
All depends on where you're from.
There you go. Where you
Oh,
sit depends on where you stand. That's right.
yeah, absolutely. And but there is a difference of process and process, or process and process, in terms of in business, we use it to describe a set of activities in which there is an input, activities done, and an output that meets a desired outcome, originating a mortgage and closing it. In facilitation, I use it both in terms of how we put a session together, because that is a process in and of itself. But within that, how I might run an activity. I
Yeah.
have to think about all the things I need to give people set up, have in the room, take them through the activity to produce a desired outcome that they've already agreed to, and how that builds by doing multiples to get to the desired outcome of the session. And that's a process too.
There you go. And I've heard in facilitation sometimes you can compare it to a hamburger where the bun is the content and the
Mhm.
meat is the process. And the main reason why I want to have this conversation with you today is because as you and I certify people in with INIFAC, or as we talk to facilitators, we know it's important to do this process, yet sometimes we don't have a clear understanding of what is a process. So that's
Mhm.
why I want to drill down on it.
Sure.
So the first question then is what is a process? I mean, do you have a rubric? What is a
Yeah,
process?
I guess there's sort of a rubric to it. I don't necessarily, when I use that word a lot, I don't necessarily think of it, but you have to identify your purpose,
Mm-hmm.
most important, and it may be a global purpose, which is the whole session or a sequence of sessions that you're doing for a sponsor, but then the purpose of everything you're doing within the session.
Mm-hmm.
What
Okay.
is, how does each activity help you move towards the end? So that's one set of inputs.
Yeah. So, if, as a facilitator, could I also say, I have a system for doing a facilitation?
Yes, I tend to think, because of my corporate background, of systems in software and hardware.
Yeah.
And so I don't tend to use that. But other people have different backgrounds. And so that may be the context in which they can get their participants to understand what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's about recognizing the local language. And local language can be within a department, within a company, within a culture.
Very important.
And that's something you need to kind of learn, which is why you interview sponsors to figure out part of it. Ideally, interview some of the people that are going to be in the session, because you can get those cues and
Yeah.
actually talk to them about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You know, uh, so
Yeah. And you can see me writing at some point. I want to talk about what happens when you have to change the process, even though
yeah,
you've very well planned. Uh, Sticking to this tone of understanding what's what, there's process management and then there's process mapping. What's the
right.
difference?
Okay. So I'm going to start with process manage mapping just because I think it'll help understand process. So process mapping, often for the visual, I'll describe it as writing every activity in a sequence that you're trying to do, mortgage originations, on a post-it. Each activity gets a different post-it. And you then put them in sequence order. Often people think you have to do all sorts of magic things. But in reality, if you have the sequence laid out in front of you, you can often identify the process that's and where it's broken. So in my case, old days, hard files, we were doing state approved loans as part of our mortgage origination, and we were the worst performers in the state. And we were the number one mortgage lender in the state at the same time. So we finally said, let's map this. So we mapped, and we realized that when we sent the file off to the state for approval, someone was assigned to pick it up and put it in the file cabinet pending approval. We had nobody assigned to take it out of the file drawer when it came back. It would sit there until a realtor or a customer complained. Solved that problem that day.
Wow.
Changed our throughput by 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just because we identified nobody took it out of the drawer.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So that's mapping. It helps you understand the sequence. Often in companies, in charities, the sequence has grown up over time. So it's useful to maybe step back and look. The other thing mapping is used for is teaching, because you can explain to somebody what they're doing, how what they're doing fits into the overall purpose. And so it can be a good teaching tool. Process management, which is what I was responsible for ultimately, was managing the entire process. So I had all of the HR, I had the budgets, and I was making sure that things would happen in terms of getting done and meeting goals and developing people and all of the things that go into running a department that has potentially a variety of processes.
Yeah. You know, in sort of harmony with that process management, it involves getting everyone to interact and getting everyone involved. So let's talk about engagement techniques for processes, which are really important because you have the big picture. We've talked about this. You have a meeting, you have this big picture, and now you've got to keep people engaged. And this is actually one of the questions, right, on our assessment is give us some engagement techniques that you use. And the reason why we ask that question is it's one thing to know processes, and we'll talk about processes in a minute, or a list of them, but how do you get people engaged?
Well, and the piece that I would add to it is if you're running, like I used to run 1 day long and 3 day long sessions, is what are the variety of ways you get people to engage, because people get bored with the same process.
Yeah.
And so in the very beginning in a company, we weren't as sensitive to it because we were all doing separate sessions on things. And finally, one executive said to me, no more Post-its. No more Post-its.
Or no more affinity diagrams. I'm done with infinity.
So you got to think about that, and pacing, as you can do things that are seated in the room,
Yeah.
but you can also do things that get them up and moving. So in my thinking about a day, I may have moving activities through the morning, but I always have moving activities after lunch.
Ooh, yeah.
Because 3 or 4 o'clock is really tough. So processes are all sorts of things. It can be breaking out into groups and having each group come up with something, maybe all the same, or maybe pieces along the way to expedite it. Reporting back, Post-its, and that, rotating flip charts. So you might have a topic of if you were reviewing a big session you ran, how did the introduction go? How did the setup of the activity, how did the activity go and the outcome? And you could have the group in groups circle around and add their thoughts to so you get everybody's thoughts about introduction in one section. And this can all be done virtually, I should say. It's a little more complicated to do that. What I and my peers have found, and I don't know what you found, Diane, is that Diane, sorry.
Lots of people. I'm Eileen.
Eileen, I don't know why I did that.
No worries.
Is that I lost my train of thought. But that we have to change, we have to think about that, and so we do a variety of things.
Right.
The virtual takes me, many of my peers, 1.5 times longer to prep for a virtual session than a regular session.
Sure.
Also takes about 1.5 times longer to do the same work.
Well, let's talk about the why on that. Why does it take longer?
With the technology, you really have to be sure you got all the pieces, that you've tested everything, and you can test it yesterday, which I did. And I was on other Zoom calls today, but I was up early and on the system and testing my camera and testing my mic and all of that kind of stuff before we talked.
And I'm going to add one. What I do is I always do a restart of my computer the night before, because that's the day that it plans to do updates. And
Yep.
it's like, ay, ay, ay. So, yeah, that's, I always
And
do
I
that.
actually do that again in the morning if I start at worst. I have what they've released over.
That's
Uh,
right.
but it is true. I've been very hung up by releases.
Right. And so you can have all this great planning, whether you're in the room or, on a Zoom call, and you're engaged and you are brilliant and you do all these things and it's not working.
Yep.
So I have two questions here. One is the why it's not working, and the other is how do you pivot? How do you change? What do you do? And you and I both know that as someone with a lot of experience as a facilitator, you have a very large toolbox. I was running a team building session in New York once. It was a 1-day session. The morning went so well, that the Grand Poobah global, president said, "This was great. You know what I realized? We don't need team building in the afternoon. We need a strategic planning session." And I said, "I'll get right on that." And that's what I planned at lunch. So sometimes you have to pivot. Sometimes you have to figure out, do you really need that? Talk to me about the pivot or some of the issues. And I definitely want to get to Mexican cartels as we weave into that question.
I'm sorry. In terms of the issues, there's what you talked about, and in fact, part of the Mexican story is that, and doing a different session in the afternoon. But part of it is you expected certain content, and no matter how you re-explain or try giving examples, the group is just not working. You typically will have either a sponsor or a senior person in the room. And overall, I would say candor's important. And so I will say, let's take a break. And I will talk to my sponsor. This happened once when I was doing beverage packaging in Switzerland. And the sponsor was about to ask me for a break because they felt it wasn't working too. So that's part of the reason for candor, is because the other people probably have an idea of what's going on. And we quickly powwowed of what we were trying to get and what could we pivot to. And so then I did it on the fly. And it was like, and candid with the group. You know what? This process isn't working. We're not getting what we're doing. You're not very engaged in it, or whatever I needed to say that was candor without
Yeah.
throwing mud at them. And
And to be fair, if there are any facilitators watching this, you know, as a facilitator, you say, let's take a break. Sure, we can do this. Meanwhile, in your head, you're going, why do I do this job? Like, what am I, I'm not paid enough for this, is what's
right,
going on in your head. But you are very composed and you're like, oh, yeah, we can do this. And it usually works out great in the
right.
end.
Because I've had sponsors do that to me too. I've had executive sponsors say, "Oh, we don't need to do it that way. Let's do this," because it's a process they're comfortable with.
Right.
Depending on who they are, I might push back in
Yeah.
more likelihood when they're executive vice presidents of the company.
Yeah.
I might just run with it if it is going to work too. I
Yeah.
won't do it just because they want.
Nice.
They've paid me for a role. That makes me in charge of the role of the. So I will often, if groups get out of hand, as they're doing various standing up exercises in particular, say, the only voice in this room you should be hearing is mine. Because they're supposed to be doing silent brainstorming.
Yeah.
And yet they're collaborating. And I don't want them to collaborate yet because I want everybody to get their ideas
Right.
out.
Right.
That's make a note to talk about introvert, extrovert, please,
Got
and
it.
we'll do that in a minute. But to answer your question, so it's be candid with yourself. Be candid with your sponsor if they're available. If not, still be candid with the group and pivot. Part of the importance that points to is you, and this gets to things like what to do next, is you need to build your toolbox
Oh, yeah.
with many processes, and I like thinking about them as processes because part of what I'm then building is what do I need, what am I going to do, and what am I expecting as an output.
Right. Right.
And that helps me pivot because I can think about, oh, well, post-its or rotating flip charts aren't working. We can do it this way,
Right.
kind of thing.
So
Or
a couple things, because I am conscious on time here. One, we've already teased about Mexican cartels. Let's do that. And then
Okay.
what I'd love to do is maybe just popcorn a whole bunch of processes, because we talk about, you know, having toolbox, but let's do that. So tell us about these Mexican cartels.
So a number of years ago, and that's why I can talk about it publicly because all of the contracts and accomplishments are done. The country of Mexico made a decision to build energy robustness throughout the country. And to do that, they were building two parallel pipelines, so they had backup, north and south, and two pipelines, east and west, to be the major trunk lines, if you think about it, the highway part of it. And a company I worked for would sell parts to the companies that bid on the contract. They had small parts, actually small budget relative to the $1 billion. And they did, and I had done a number of these before for them, messaging sessions. It was really a fascinating thing for a company to do. They brought everybody together from the product designers, the manufacturers, the salespeople, the engineers. Everybody was in the room and often hired somebody from the outside as a customer representative voice. And through that, we were going through a methodology that said, what does the customer really want? What do we do really well that other companies don't do? And what's our message around that? Because they were trying to focus on their niche and have all these people collaborated. What happened was the marketing and writing people that were also in the room and participants would then go back and summarize this and create a marketing book that was the Bible if you needed a letter, if you needed a brochure, all of that kind of stuff. But you got to think about Mexico. And particularly, this was in the days of the cartels being in Mexico and not elsewhere, kind of thing. And so you don't want to send people out into the field to repair a pipeline unnecessarily because they may be going through various gangs territory. And there's a lot of things in Mexico that can kill you in terms of animals and bugs and that kind of stuff. And so part of what this technology did was identify motion, vibration, all sorts of things, so it could diagnose something that was 500 miles away. And so instead of having a technician to go out, find out why it wasn't running, have to come back and get the
Yes.
part and go out,
Yeah.
they could equip them with this. This is the probable pieces to need replace, and they could go out once.
Sounds like process mapping at its finest.
Yes, yes. I mean, it really was, and their technology was incredible. It was also the technology used on beverage packaging, which gave 100% guarantee of the weights and content because
Beautiful.
they measured so finely. Uh,
Beautiful.
fine.
Okay,
Let me
let's
quick aside. We
okay.
finished early, and I was a corporate risk manager. I've done all sorts of things on project risk, and so I said, because they were paying me no matter what, I said to my sponsor, "Do you want to do this? And I think you need a few more people in the room that aren't here." And he said, "Yes."
Oh,
And so we did an afternoon session that identified all the risks and identified risk owners and assigned them responsibility for
beautiful.
coming up with a
Yeah.
plan. And what it did for them that they hadn't identified is they owned the subsidiaries they made. They realized they had to reach back all the way to the supply line to the manufacturer to make sure they could make the
There you go.
deadline.
So it's
So the
really
plan
having those
is the
best,
end process,
yeah, having
but
the
all the
right
way back
people
to
in the
somebody
room.
else's supply line.
Having the right people in the room. Right on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
So, so,
Dorothea, let's just do a brain dump here. Let's just go back and forth. Let's do a whole bunch of processes.
sure.
So I'm going to throw out gallery walk. This is where you have flip charts on all over the walls, and everyone checks it out. Your turn. Give us a process.
Storytelling, what we did to create the message, it
Ooh,
was really
nice.
almost the back of an envelope.
Yeah.
After they listened to all this for 2 days, they teams took and had 45 minutes to an hour to write what they'd say to a client if they had the elevator speech.
Yeah. Another process when we start looking at decision making is like dot voting. Like everyone gets 3 dots, so you can vote. Over to you.
Right. Going with round robins, because round robins helps everybody talk. The
Very
other
good.
thing when I do brainstorming, because I'm what I would call a blurt person, I think quickly and I'm ready to say it. Not everybody is. I'm not any smarter than I am. I just think differently than they do. And so giving them 2 minutes, 1 minute even, is really a lot of time.
Mm,
Everybody's silent for a minute.
mm-hmm.
Write down your key thoughts that pop in your head, and now we'll start to brainstorm together.
Yep. I also like start, stop, continue. So it's 3 quick words. Fill in the blank. What do we need to start? What do we need to stop? What do we need to continue? Boom. Over to you. Give us one more. Then we need to talk about introvert, extroverts, and then we need to wrap it up.
Role plays, where people are actually sort of in that position, helps them think about what might be important that from the outside or from only looking at one step in the overall process, they don't necessarily get.
And on that one, I want to put a caveat because not every group can deal with role plays, and senior leaders can't deal with role plays, and it's like this is stupid. And sometimes you just have to call it something different. Like now you're going to practice these skills. I know one company calls it real play, where we're going to do something real, not just fake or whatever. That one, I always have to I have to read the room on
Yeah.
role plays. So, okay, talk to me about introvert extroverts, and then we're running out of
Okay,
time.
sort of referenced it before. It's the idea that people process information and get comfortable sharing
Mm-hmm.
at different speeds and in different ways. And so trying to give people time so that they have a chance to get there. I facilitate a group of sophomores, have for 20 years, and we watch a video, but we don't talk about the video right away. They have to write notes in their journal, and then we talk about the video because it puts all of them on an equal playing field in terms of comfort. We do round robins because there are people who just are less likely to talk. And so those are different techniques to help an introvert be more comfortable. You don't have to worry about the blurters. And to the round robins is to force somebody to finally speak.
And I always say there are those that talk to think, and there are those that think to talk, and you need to give the think to talkers time to think to talk. So, right on. Okay, final question to you. What suggestions do you have then for someone wanting to improve their ability to establish these facilitation processes?
One, in this case, the internet is a wonderful thing to just see and watch. So you can find plenty of videos like this that start to talk through things. Two is study, but go take classes. Some of them are free. Some of the groups offer like 1 hour webinars that are riveting and really good. The other thing is practice, practice, practice. One of the safe ways to do that is in your local community as a volunteer.
Yes.
So I used to, one of the interesting ones I did was our town wanted to run a town-wide food drive. And as I did the research, because I'm also a researcher, I couldn't find an example anyplace in the world. So I designed a brainstorming session because I had to invite everybody in town that wanted to come and let them brainstorm. And so I figured out kind of the categories and gave them a charge. And by the end of that meeting, we had the starts of project plans for every single activity that had to happen in 2 hours. And I had people walk back and say, if you ever run another meeting, I'll come.
That's awesome.
Because they had fun.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Dorothea, thank you for this brain dump. This was fun. And I personally know that, boy, you've got stories, and it's so great to pick your brain on some of those. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Thank you. You know, I always love collaborating with you. We have a good time together.
We do
Thanks.
indeed.
And you're one of my mentors in facilitation, so that's really important to me.
Thank you. Thank you.